Let's explore sadness, loneliness, and the sense of alienation. This is Jurgen Rasmussen, by the way. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis vlog. So, it's so bizarre in some ways that so many of us feel so alienated and lonely and sad. I just had a conversation with a client who felt that way. So, I want to offer some perspectives that have been extremely useful to many. Now, imagine sitting at a restaurant, drinking a cup of coffee, and just reflecting upon how many people have to be involved for that cup of coffee to end up at your table. Like, if you really begin to contemplate it, it's just mind boggling to consider just how many people have to be involved for that cup of coffee to emerge on that table. We are deeply interconnected. We're deeply interconnected with everyone and everything. Fundamentally, you are life itself. You are an expression of the life force emerging or taking form. You might be a distinct expression of that life force, the mind body system that you call you, but just like a wave in the ocean might be a distinct individual expression of the ocean, but fundamentally it is the ocean. It's not separate. So, given that we are life itself, we are our total environment, and we're so deeply interconnected, how can it be that so many feel so alienated? And how can it be that so many feel such feelings of despair and sadness? Now, the feeling of sadness is, of course, the perception of loss. Now, you may, of course, have lost something, but it's worth to contemplate and to explore whether you have really lost what you think you've lost, or whether what you think you've lost actually is your true nature. So consider this in a social interaction. You and I are deeply connected. We're interconnected. We're part of the same life force. Now, whether we have a feeling of being connected to each other, that's something else. So, if there's a lot of noise going on in my mind, a lot of rumination, a lot of worries, a lot of insecurities or distractions, and if the same thing happens for you, then we both will likely not feel that sense of connection. It's a bit like, to use the classic analogy, the way if you look at the analogy of the sky and the clouds, it's like the analogy of all the clouds seeming to veil the sky. Now, the key word there is seeming. So here's something to contemplate. What if the feelings of being alienated or the perceptions of loss or a sort of barometer to remind you that you're lost in thought? That you're lost in thought and absorbed into the imaginary thought world, and as a result of that, you seem alienated from life itself. But the key word here is seems. Contemplate that. Really, really contemplate that. It's a bit like social anxiety. As I very often say to my clients, the difference between the person who's anxious in a social situation and the person who's not is that the person who's not has one conversation less. For the person who's connected, there's just the conversation. There's just the bantering. There's just the exchange of energy flow and information, if you will. There's no sense of being something separate from the conversation. But the person who's insecure and anxious is having additional conversations about the conversation. The feeling of alienation is a signal that they're lost in thought and thereby seemingly seem to have lost access to the connection and the interdependence that they fundamentally already are. Now, of course, none of this is to take away from the importance of quality friendships and quality relationships. For many people, that is the biggest antidepressant of all. We are fundamentally social animals. But there is a huge distinction between seeking relationships under the guise of looking for someone to kind of complete us or to validate us versus having that sense of being life itself and completely interdependent and then expressing your individuality with someone who seems to be on the same wavelength. That is a quite different orientation. Something else to consider. People can be lonely in a crowd, and people can be alone and not be lonely at all. We have the term solitude, which kind of points to people enjoying their own company. Also, people can have the experience or the perception of being truly seen and kind of discover after the fact that that was an illusion too. I'm thinking of quite a few clients I have seen who have been love bombed in relationships with people who probably have quite strong narcissistic traits. So someone who has a very high narcissistic traits, they might love bomb a particular or potential partner, put them up on a pedestal, essentially persuade them and sell them the idea. They're the greatest thing ever, since sliced bread. And the partner might feel so validated and feel so special and feel so seen. But of course, in the case of the person with highly narcissistic traits, they're not seeing you, they're projecting you to be the best thing ever, so that if you then want to be with them, it affirms them as special. It had nothing to do with you. It had nothing to do with you at all, but people can feel highly seen and visible in a situation where someone's not actually seeing them at all, right? So ultimately, being seen too is a perception, it is an experience. None of this is to take away just from the psychological fact that people can be lonely in relationships and that people might have a strong preference for spending time with people who seem to share their values and who kind of get them on a psychological level. Nothing wrong with that. But I hope these perspectives were useful. If they resonate with you, you might be interested in knowing that I'm doing a masterclass on how to work with depressed clients. I'm sharing from my 28 years of experience of seeing clients full-time professionally. It starts on March the 12th and ends on April the 9th. It's going to be 5 2-hour sessions on weekly on how to work with depressed clients. You can go to provocativehypnosis.com on the seminar page and you'll see the link to the seminar. Really hope to see you there if it resonates. Also know that I see clients from all over the spinning planet online. If you're curious about whether you and I could be a good match, I invite you to reach out to me, shoot me an email, and we can meet up and see if it makes sense to work together. As always, Thanks for listening.